Nice bum. Thanks. I got it from my mom. Why are you worried about cancer? Runs in my family. You have pretty eyes. Good genes, I guess. Why are you so smart? Yeah, I inherited that. Hey guys, I'm back here with video number 2. I thought I'd start us off with some genetics because it's something that I've always found super interesting, how you inherit things. Usually we talk about traits that people can see, like hair color or eye color, maybe the ability to roll your tongue. I can roll my tongue, but not everyone can. There's also ones that are a little bit harder to see. Things like your ability to taste bitter. So I can't taste bitter. I've done a test for it. Kind of strange to think about. I don't know what bitter tastes like. So those are some different traits, some that you can see and some that you can't. So what controls these traits? Well, it's a little molecule called DNA. And DNA acts as the code for the finished website. In this case, the finished website that has been coded for is your traits. Your traits such as eye color. And DNA does this through cells. It is located inside of cells. So here's a drawing and you can see DNA is in the middle in the nucleus. Cells are what you are made up of. They make up you. Everything in your body is made up of cells. For example, skin cells or blood cells. And the DNA within these cells is what results in your traits. If you zoom in and look inside of the cell, in the nucleus, you find DNA is organized in chromosomes. So chromosomes are made out of DNA. Inside every human cell, there are 23 chromosome pairs. So the reason that they're paired is because one comes from your mother and one comes from your father. Half, or about 50%, of your DNA is from your mom, and about half, or 50%, of your DNA is from your dad, which means that about half of the traits that are caused by your DNA are from your mom or your dad. Let's zoom in and take a look at one of the chromosome pairs. So on the chromosome pairs, you have genes, or small sections of DNA that code for your trait. And because you have a pair of chromosomes, you have 2 copies of the gene. But you only have one trait that shows. How would this happen? So let's show an example of how you can go from having 2 different genes to only having one trait that is shown. So we have a parent that has the red trait and a parent that has the yellow trait. Now both of them pass half of their DNA onto their child here. And when we do that, we can see that the trait that's expressed is still red. In other words, the red trait is dominant. So let's go back to this gene on a chromosome. The gene, the small piece of DNA that codes for a trait. So let's look at a real case example, the ability to taste bitter. So in this scenario, the dad passes on a gene that is able to taste bitter, and the mom, red, passes on a gene that is not able to taste bitter. But because tasting bitter is a dominant trait, like the red food dye, you are able to taste bitter. However, you have a sibling that for some reason can't taste bitter. How is this possible? Let's look at your parents. Your mom isn't able to taste bitter, and your dad is able to taste bitter. So your dad can pass on a gene for tasting bitter or for being unable to taste bitter, but your mom can only pass on a gene for being unable to. This means half of the time, their kids would be like you, able to taste bitter, and half of the time, their kids would end up like your sibling, unable to taste bitter. So after looking and learning about DNA and traits, I thought it would be fun to go onto a real-life genetic testing website and see what traits you could get tested. So we're going to go on to a website called 23andMe. I'm not sponsored, and there are other websites you could go to. Usually those ones are just recommended through a family doctor. Also, if you are considering getting your genes tested, going for genetic testing, make sure you do your research first, and it is the knowledge that you want to have about your health. So, the ability to match musical pitch, interesting. Asparagus odor detection. All right. This one's bitter taste, so that's what we were talking about actually, which you can test with PTC. Cheek dimples. This is another hereditary one that I didn't mention before, so usually it's something that would be inherited. So I don't have any cheek dimples, unfortunately. Cleft chin. So if you have a little butt chin, I can't do it. Early hair loss might be interesting to find out if you want to try and prevent it. Eye color. So this one would be one of the ones that's controlled by many different genes, but in this type of test, they're probably looking at all of them. Fear of heights. I'm not sure what genes control that, but I would be interested to find out how they're looking into some of this stuff. And remember, these tests, these traits, mean that you're more likely to be afraid of heights, but with traits like that, it doesn't necessarily mean that if you have those certain genes, you will most definitely be afraid of heights. Same goes for fear of public speaking. Ice cream flavor preference, another interesting one. I wonder what it has to say about my chocolate ice cream flavor preference. Photic sneeze reflex, so that's if you see light and you sneeze. No, sorry, not happening right now. It does happen sometimes for me though. So some pretty interesting stuff to look into. Most of that you might already know about yourself, but it's kind of cool to see that your DNA can actually help a stranger tell all of these things about you. So sometimes traits are light and funny, like whether you can taste bitter or not, but sometimes they're more serious, like if you're more predisposed to cancer because of one of the genes you have. So you can look at those with 23andMe as well. BRCA1, this is one that is a big gene. So there's 3 variants in these 2 genes, and this was discovered not too long ago to have a very strong link to later on developing breast cancer and ovarian cancer. They also have some linked for celiac disease, so the inability to eat gluten. Alcohol flush reaction. I know in Asian populations, sometimes it's a lot more common for your cheeks to go really red when you drink alcohol. Or caffeine consumption. I'm pretty sensitive to caffeine, so I try and usually avoid it. Genetic weight. So there are thought to be some things in your genes, in your DNA, that can tell you what range your weight would be within. So of course, a lot of things that might kind of predict in your genes are also involved in what you do after you're born. So things like exercise and diet. So they would probably be able to give you a range that's most likely your weight. Lactose intolerance, so whether or not you can tolerate lactose in milk and cheese. Genetics is really interesting, and I just thought that it would be great to share with all of you in a way that is hopefully easy to digest and is actually relevant to the traits you can see. So now, when someone asks you, did you get that trait from your mom? You'll know what they mean. Okay, have a great night, guys. That was a weird sign off. Sticking with it. Hey guys. Let me try again, starting from the top. Yeah. What's up, bud? Are you sure you're not adopted? Nice bum. That's not the stop button. I forget how to stop this. Ah.